Life, as I knew it, had always felt predictable yet fulfilling. Growing up in Byron Bay, I basked in the serenity of a close-knit community where each face was familiar. My high school years, however, were anything but typical. Amidst balancing teenage dreams and responsibilities, Shauna entered my life. She became my confidant, the friend who understood my quirks and silences better than anyone. When Maddie, our daughter, was born, my world shifted dramatically. At just 18, I embraced fatherhood, believing that love and determination could anchor us through life's challenges. Shauna and I tied the knot soon after, convinced we were building the perfect family. But as the years passed, cracks began to form. We transitioned from high school sweethearts to business-like co-parents, our connection morphing into an enduring friendship rather than a romantic partnership. In my early 20s, I founded Other Gaming, a company that grew beyond my wildest dreams. Amidst expanding operations and sleepless nights, I found myself pouring all my energy into my work. Shauna and I amicably divorced, learning the hard way that love and compatibility aren't always synonymous. Yet, we emerged stronger, co-parenting Maddie with the mutual respect that characterized our bond. Life seemed stable until Bridget entered the picture, a whirlwind romance that felt like a fresh start. "Are you aware she's betraying you?" Shayna's voice sliced through the chilly air, her intense gaze holding mine in place. Her question struck with unexpected weight, shattering the tranquility of our afternoon on her porch. We sat in the lingering light of a gray Byron Bay day, the cool breeze tugging at our sweaters, and I grasped for words to respond. Though her statement wasn't entirely unanticipated, hearing it out loud left me stunned. After a few moments, I met her gaze, wishing I could rewind the last 30 seconds. Shauna wouldn't say this without reason. My shoulders tightened, and I looked up at the cold gray sky. For those of us from Byron Bay, Australia, this was the coldest season. The chilly ocean breeze swept over us as we sat bundled in sweaters, sipping hot chocolate in the late afternoon. I avoided her eyes, studying the clouds that signaled rain in the coming hours. With a sigh, I picked up my half-empty mug, focusing on the shifting cloud shapes. The fleeting blue sky felt as unreachable as my happiness. No matter how hard I tried, the weather couldn't distract me from Shauna's words. I glanced at Maddie, my 8-year-old daughter, happily pushing her half-brother Greg on the swings in Shauna's backyard. Minutes passed in silence. Shauna waited for me to process it. She knew I had sensed something off for a while. The excuses, distance, arguments that led to nights in the spare room had turned me moody and withdrawn. But I avoided conflict whenever I could. I sighed again, watching Maddie and Greg play as long-buried emotions surfaced. The tension I'd carried for months tightened into a painful knot. I swallowed hard and looked back at Shanna, who wore an expression of mixed guilt and support. She reached into the oversized bag beside her and pulled out an envelope. "I'm sorry, but Bridget is cheating on you," she repeated. She held the large envelope for a moment, her eyes filled with sympathy. Setting it on the table, she placed her hand over it. "It's all in here. I debated telling you, but you need to know. Do you want it now or later?" she asked, her voice strained. She could see the desperation in my face. This pained her as much as it did me. She'd been my closest friend for most of my life and knew me better than anyone. My name is Timothy, but everyone calls me Tim. I once believed I was happily married to Bridget, but as I stared at the envelope Shanna held, I knew it contained proof that shattered that illusion. Thinking back over the past year, nothing specific stood out, yet doubts about Bridget's loyalty lingered. I glanced at the envelope in Shanna's hand, dread building. This wasn't my first experience with infidelity. We sat in silence as I focused on the envelope, knowing whatever it contained would hurt. "How's Rick?" I asked, my voice trembling as I clutched my cooling hot chocolate. "Rick," she replied simply. Rick, Shanna's husband and a respected family lawyer, had a complex relationship with me. Despite our shared history with Shanna, he'd become a reliable friend over the years. The envelope's contents would determine if Bridget and I were truly over and reveal, if Rick had intervened for my sake or out of resentment. A wave of nausea hit me as I stared at the envelope. "I can't go through this again," I thought. "Tim, you're not alone," Shanna said, sensing my emotions. We were only 25, and the thought of a second divorce before 30 was daunting. Maddie, my 8-year-old daughter, appeared holding her 1-year-old half-brother, Greg. "Mom, Greg needs a diaper change," she announced, nose wrinkled at the smell. Shauna took Greg from Maddie, shot me a knowing glance, and put the envelope away. Maddie didn't need to see its contents. Maddie climbed into my lap, hugging me. Are you okay, Daddy? What were you and Mom talking about? You're not fighting again, are you? Her voice held a mix of worry and curiosity. Though Shauna and I weren't together, we'd always been close friends in her eyes. Years ago, Maddie asked why we weren't together if we loved each other so much. We explained more as she grew, but stories of past fights bothered her. Shauna and I had met in high school, becoming best friends, then dating. Teenage pregnancy shocked our families, but they supported us. We married after Maddie's birth, believing it was the right move. However, marriage wasn't right for our friendship. Despite the love we shared, small issues piled up and pulled us apart. I was a programmer and gamer who started my first business at 16. By 18, I was married with a child, working 80, 90-hour weeks. I tried to give Shanna and Maddie everything, but it wasn't enough. We were too young for the stresses we faced. Our parents, though supportive, doubted we'd last and made us sign a prenup. Mine tied to startup funds, hers to protect against potential failure. The business succeeded, leading to my next venture, Other Gaming. By my early 20s, I had a staff of 50 spread across 3 countries, including programmers, testers, marketers, and admins. My company, Other Gaming, generated around $180 million annually from mostly free-to-play games with microtransactions, purchases for extra resources, time, or power-ups. While our profits weren't as high as some larger gaming companies, investors were always satisfied with our performance. Shauna and I loved our daughter and were best friends. But we weren't in love the way soulmates are. Small, overlooked issues chipped away at our marriage, and my long work hours contributed to its downfall. The fights became frequent, about chores, my work, and Maddie. One night I had a late meeting with investors but forgot to tell Shauna. Meanwhile, she hadn't told me about Maddie's daycare meeting. When I got home, tensions exploded. After yelling at each other, Shanna stormed out, spent the night drinking, and woke up in a stranger's bed. To her credit, Shauna was honest and remorseful. When she confessed, my world shattered. I lashed out, calling her names. She retaliated, accusing me of being a neglectful, boring husband and father. The moment the words left her mouth, she knew it was a mistake. I moved into the spare room that night. Our fights continued for months. I filed for divorce, citing infidelity per the prenup. Shanna, hurt and frustrated, oscillated between apologizing and lashing out when I didn't forgive her. Only around Maddie did we find moments of strained peace. Our parents finally stepped in, confronting us and forcing a truce. One night after they lectured us for hours, they left us alone. We sat in silence for 15 minutes before we started talking. Really talking, for the first time since everything fell apart. "I'm so sorry, Tim," Shauna said, tears in her eyes. "I shouldn't have left that night. I disrespected you. I was stupid and hurt you." I sighed, pained but sincere. "I'm sorry too, Shauna. It hurt, but you're my closest friend. I had to forgive you." She touched my cheek gently. "Thanks, Tim. But where does that leave us?" We talked for hours and agreed that we could only rebuild trust as friends, not as a married couple. For the first time in months, Shanna cried in my arms. We never shared a bed again, but spent more time together, deciding that co-parenting as friends was best. Over 18 months, the divorce process unfolded, and Shanna and I became close friends again, letting go of bitterness and regaining trust. Though we hugged and occasionally shared a friendly kiss, romantic love had faded. I still loved Shauna deeply, but valued her more as a friend. Our marriage had broken us, and trust couldn't be restored. I started dating Bridget less than a year after the divorce, just after Maddie's 4th birthday. Bridget worked with Shanna, and that's how we met. She had hinted at dating for months and finally asked me out. Shanna gave her hesitant approval, though I could tell it hurt her. Despite that, she supported me, even when she had tears in her eyes after hearing about my dates. Bridget and I grew closer, and 3 months in, she changed everything for me in bed. 6 months later, she admitted she'd ended an intense but unhealthy relationship around the time of my divorce. She saw me as a kind and stable person compared to her past. Bridget, petite and fit, eventually moved in with me. We had fun, shared laughter, and enjoyed staying in or going out. A year in, she hinted at marriage, and I soon proposed. We married 8 months later, though not without conflicts over a prenup. After tense discussions and pressure from my board, she signed it. While Bridget and I prepared for marriage, Shauna met Rick, who I couldn't dislike. He was older, supportive, and balanced her in ways I couldn't. Their relationship started slowly, unlike the passionate start Bridget and I had. Shanna and I talked through our feelings to avoid letting jealousy ruin our friendship. As Bridget and I and Rick and Shanna became couples, everyone respected our bond. Early on, Rick once reacted to seeing Shanna hug me after I dropped Maddie off, but Shanna told him to accept our friendship or leave. By then, Bridget and I were married, and Shanna and Rick were engaged. 6 months later, I stood as Rick's best man at his wedding to Shanna. It felt surreal how our relationship had evolved. Shanna and I had always been close, and with Maddie in the picture, that connection was permanent. Once Rick accepted that, we became close friends. He saw that while I loved Shanna, it wasn't in the same way he did. Meanwhile, Bridget and Shanna shared an amicable, though not deep, friendship. Back in the present, Maddie, my restless daughter, stole a chocolate chip from a cupcake. I kissed her cheek. "No, honey," I said, trying to explain without revealing too much. "Mom and I aren't fighting. She's just talking to me about something difficult." "It's about Bridget, isn't it?" Maddie said, looking defiant. I was surprised. "Maddie, you need to respect Bridget. You like Rick, and he's not your dad." She picked at the muffin and muttered, "Yeah, but Rick respects you and Mom. Bridget doesn't like Mom or me, and she doesn't respect you." Her words hit me hard. Bridget and I had been together for 4 years, married for 3, and it dawned on me that I had ignored signs of her behavior. I'd been passive, trying to make it work. After a silent moment, Shanna returned with Greg and told Maddie to take him outside. Maddie protested but obeyed when Shanna used her mom voice. We watched Maddie and Greg play in the sandbox. "Maddie sees too much for her age," Shanna said. "She must get it from you," I replied sadly. Looking at Shanna, the woman I had loved for so long, I felt despair. Without seeing the envelope's contents yet, I already knew. Shanna sat beside me and embraced me as tears fell. I knew deep down that Bridget hadn't loved me the same for a while. I reached for the envelope, opened it, and found 2 documents and a USB drive. Shanna placed her hand on mine. "Tim, this is only going to hurt." Inside were detailed reports and recordings that confirmed everything. I returned the contents to the envelope, feeling numb. "Why?" I asked, broken. Shanna didn't respond, sensing my pain. "Tim," she began, but stopped. "Am I so pathetic that the women I love cheat on me?" I regretted the words as soon as they left my mouth. Shanna quickly kissed my cheek and hugged me, crying. "I'm sorry, Tim. I shouldn't have—" "It's not you, Shanna," I interrupted. "I'm sorry for comparing it to us. Will you forgive me?" She pulled away, smiled weakly, and kissed my forehead. "Of course," a voice interrupted us. Well, what do we have here?" Rick approached us, trying to keep a serious look, but failing as a smile played on his face. His expression shifted to concern when he saw the envelope in my hands. "Oh," he said, sitting beside me and placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. "Sorry, man. I started this after talking with Shanna and Maddie a couple of months ago. I had a private investigator look into it and got the report yesterday," Rick explained, concern clear on his face. "Have you seen it?" I asked. Rick shook his head. "No, just the basics, but it seems you both have." We nodded, and Rick leaned back. "So what's next?" he asked. "Divorce," I shrugged. We watched Maddie and Greg playing in the sandbox, Maddie glancing at us occasionally. Despite the heavy moment, we smiled. "Babe," Shanna said to Rick, "should we—" "Introduce Tim," Rick finished. Shanna nodded, and I agreed, handing the envelope to Rick. "You'll need this," I said. Rick returned it. "I have a copy on my desk. This is yours." I quickly emailed a copy of the prenup Bridget and I signed to my new family lawyer, feeling ironic amusement as I sent it to my ex-wife's husband. Shanna smiled. "What's that for?" "For my lawyer. Time to move forward with the divorce," I said as Rick gave a knowing smile. After a pause, Shanna hugged me, and Rick patted my back. "Good to see you haven't lost your humor," Rick said. We talked about my next steps. "Bridget's spending a week with her mother on the Gold Coast," I said, realizing she probably wasn't there. The looks Rick and Shanna exchanged confirmed my suspicion. "Okay," I said, feeling the sting of betrayal deepen. We spoke for a bit before Maddie returned with Greg as the sun set. After many hugs, I left in my Arctic White 2016 Mach 1 Mustang, a reward for reaching $5 million in revenue. A surprise to the board when I spent only part of my budget. At home, the security gate closed behind me. The house, rented from a subsidiary of Other Gaming, was modern, spacious, and what Bridget wanted. I only needed an office and a bed. The house had seen its share of parties and memories. The thought of Bridget and Brad here made me uneasy. Dropping the envelope on the counter, I poured a double shot of Bundaberg rum, mixed it with Coke, and prepared to read the report and review the USB contents. The report confirmed Bridget and Brad's history. They had dated before Bridget and I met, but had a rough breakup. The investigators' findings proved my suspicions true. The report confirmed Bridget and Brad had dated before she and I got together, breaking up months prior. Reading through it, I saw that while their breakup was rough, they hadn't been in contact for 6 months before my wedding. But less than 3 months after our honeymoon, Bridget restarted her relationship with Brad. The report included transcripts of conversations and a USB with video and audio evidence showing their full-blown affair. One conversation detailed them at Brad's apartment a month ago. I played the video and watched as Brad, emotional, said, "Why don't you leave that loser and come back to me? You're in my bed as much as his." Bridget laughed. "Tim has 2 things you don't, brains and money," she replied. Brad scoffed, and Bridget explained, "Tim's successful, and I can use that while I'm his wife. That's why I took my chance when Shanna left him. If Tim ever catches us, I'll end up with nothing." Brad complained. "But you're still with him." "I have to be," Bridget said. "If I don't act like a good wife, this," she gestured around, "ends." Brad groaned, but accepted it. Bridget then added with a grin, "Tim and I might start trying for kids soon. What if I stop taking the pill and pass it off as his? When the baby's 18, you can tell him it's yours before an accident happens." Brad cheered, and I rushed to the bathroom, nauseous. I barely slept, haunted by the report and video. By 8:30 a.m., my phone woke me. Bridget's cheerful voice greeted me. "Hello, big guy! Are you home while I'm gone?" I paused, unsure how to respond. "Tim, are you okay?" she asked, concern in her voice. Feigned, I decided. "Yeah, just a late night, dealing with complicated work," I replied. "Oh, I'm sorry, baby. I'll be back Monday night. Maybe we can start working on that baby," she said, confirming her plans with Brad. "Sure," I said flatly. "Tim?" She sounded uncertain. "I'm fine, Bridget, just tired," I sighed. "Okay, I'll bring something nice back for you," she said. "Sounds good," I replied, feigning affection. "Love you," she said. "Goodbye," I responded and ended the call. The thought of Bridget trying to get pregnant with Brad's child while passing it off as mine haunted me. A few weeks ago, she'd made a show of throwing out her birth control, claiming it was time to start a family. I was furious. I spent the day taking action, cutting off Bridget's access to my bank accounts, canceling joint credit cards, and having my accountant and lawyer remove her from my insurance and will. I also drafted letters introducing Rick to my team to set things in motion. The net was closing around Bridget, and I felt a grim satisfaction. Around lunchtime, Rick and Shanna brought food, and Maddie took Greg to play in her room while Shanna prepared lunch, and Rick and I talked. "Thanks for the letter," Rick said, studying me. "You look exhausted." I nodded. "Barely slept. The dreams—" Rick nodded in understanding. "Do you think Monday's too soon to act?" he asked. "No, I want this done fast," I replied. Rick agreed, offering to work that day for an extra fee. "Not a problem," I said. We talked about the investigator's report, and I revealed that Bridget was planning to pass Brad's child as mine. Rick's eyes widened, and Shanna looked shocked. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Yes, and I saw her say it on video," I said, slumping. "Don't worry, Tim," Rick assured me. "I'll prepare a restraining order for Monday." "I'll help pack her things," Shanna added. I spent hours packing Bridget's belongings, keeping only what she owned before our marriage. Shanna and I boxed up her clothes and personal items, while I planned to donate the rest. Rick called a few times to discuss details, and by the time he returned with takeout that evening, his serious demeanor showed he'd reviewed the evidence. He hugged me, showing genuine friendship. I handed him a note. "What's this?" he asked. "The new front gate code. I reset everything and removed Bridget's access," I explained. "Perfect," Rick said. We talked briefly before he found his son, and Shanna and I prepared dinner. They stayed the night and most of Sunday, with Rick discussing divorce steps. Unlike my amicable split with Shanna, this time I was determined not to let Bridget gain anything. On Sunday morning, Shanna admitted, "I never thought she loved you, Tim. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." "I get it," I said, understanding her hesitation due to our history. Shanna added, "You allowed her freedom, but she took advantage. I'm glad this ended before the pregnancy." We talked until Maddie came in, leading a smiling Greg by the hands. We spent 15 minutes entertaining the kids before Rick put on a movie for them. "Maddie really picked up on everything," Shanna said. "She never liked Bridget. No one messes with her dad. Except her mom," I joked, earning a playful punch. Shanna's expression turned serious. "Tim, I'm sorry things didn't work out, but that doesn't mean I love you any less," she said, her eyes sad. "I know," I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "You're my best friend." We made Maddie together, went through so much, and you showed me true character, Shanna continued. You never treated me poorly, even when I deserved it. Rick, overhearing, added, Tim, you're one of the few people I trust. When Shanna told me to stop being jealous, I realized you were just a decent man wanting to raise his daughter and stay friends. Rick looked at me. Tim, you're not submissive. I've seen you stand your ground with Shanna and others. Shanna nodded. You play by your own rules. Bridget underestimated that. Rick turned serious. You did everything right as a husband, and Bridget's betrayal is her loss, not yours. We calmed down, and Shanna offered to let Maddie stay with me for support, but I declined, not wanting her caught in any fallout. On Monday, I worked at the office on a major project, anxious about what was to come. By late afternoon, my phone rang. Tim, my code isn't working at the gate, Bridget said sweetly. I know, I replied firmly. What do you mean? She asked, concerned. I know everything, Bridget, about Brad, your plans, your time off, the apartment I paid for, and that you don't love me. She stayed silent. Your access is revoked. You don't live here anymore. But Tim, I love you, she insisted, fear creeping into her voice. Look behind you, I said, seeing cars pull up through the window. A man's voice came through her phone. Mrs. Bridget Other? Yes, she replied, voice shaking. You've been served, he said, detailing the divorce petition, the prenup, the eviction notice, and the restraining order effective tonight. Bridget stood frozen as reality hit. The man who served Bridget left in his car. He was worth every penny I paid Rick. Bridget's next conversation was with her mother, Marion, who had just arrived. Mom, Tim, she started, but Marion slapped her, the sound audible over the phone. Ho, Marion said. I know what you did to Tim. I've never been so disappointed. Mom, whatever Tim told you isn't true, Bridget protested, touching her cheek. Marion looked ready to slap her again, but walked back to her car. Stop, Bridget. Tim showed me a picture and I know the truth. He asked us to take you in. I can't believe you got involved with Brad again. He's a loser compared to Tim, Marion said. Still listening on the line, I heard Marion add, Tim moved your things to our place. If I were him, I'd have burned them. Get in. Ignoring Bridget's protests, she got in the car. Bridget realized our call was still connected. Tim, she said hesitantly. Bridget, I replied coldly. There's no fixing this, is there? She asked, a mix of hope and despair in her voice. I laughed bitterly. Not a chance. Follow the divorce terms and you'll be fine. Cross me and I'll leave you with nothing. I did love you, I added quietly, but you ruined it for money. Oh, and Bridget, I said, pausing. She held her breath. Take a pregnancy test. If you're pregnant, we both know it's not mine. Try to claim otherwise, and I'll make sure you regret it. I hung up to the sound of her sobbing. I felt empty, but better. The next month was tough. I buried myself in work and spent time with Maddie. Nights were restless, filled with bad dreams. Bridget's lawyer planned to challenge the prenup, aiming for a 50-50th split. Rick put forward a $30,000 settlement, but no response came. That weekend, I took Maddie to the beach. We ate ice cream outside an old fish and chip shop after a swim. The cool breeze hinted at winter, but the sun kept the water pleasant. Suddenly, I was pulled backward off my chair. Maddie screamed as I fall on the ground, gasping for breath. Brad Houghton loomed over me, saliva on my face. You couldn't satisfy Bridget, he taunted. He glanced at Maddie with a twisted smile. I bet she isn't even yours. Brad stepped toward me. You got me kicked out. I was fine with Bridget playing house with you. All you had to do was stay in line. I tried to dodge, but caught his punch in my shoulder, spinning into a garden bed. Before he could punch me again, Maddie jumped in front, shouting, Leave my dad alone! He hasn't done anything! Help! Police! I was later told I was unconscious for about 30 seconds. When I came to, a small crowd surrounded me, and my arm was wrapped protectively around Maddie. Brad was gone. Someone said they had called emergency services, and help was on the way. Ignoring the pain in my back and arm, I sat up and asked for my phone and keys. An older man looked at me sympathetically. Sorry, son, he took your phone and keys. I nodded, feeling the throbbing pain. With a towel pressed to my head, I asked for Maddie's bag. A younger man brought it over, and I used Maddie's phone to call Shauna. She answered on the third ring, cheerful. Shauna, I croaked. Tim, what's wrong? She asked, her voice tight with concern. We're hurt. Maddie's okay but shaken. The police and ambulance are on their way. Call Nadine to track my phone. It's urgent. What happened? She asked, her voice breaking. Brad attacked us, I said. Maddie, fighting tears, stayed silent beside me. He has my phone and keys. He might have my car too. I'm on it. Take care of Maddie, Shauna said. I will, I replied, and hung up. Paramedics arrived and checked Maddie and me. They suspected Maddie's arm was broken and said she'd be worse off if I hadn't intervened. They moved us into the ambulance and took an initial statement from me as we headed to the hospital. In the ER, Maddie and I were treated in the same bay. She clung to me until Shauna rushed in, found Maddie, and hugged her. She then turned to me, kissing my cheek gratefully. X-rays confirmed Maddie's small arm fracture, and she was treated with a child-safe anesthetic and bandaged. I had a concussion, 5 broken ribs, and a fractured arm. The doctor warned me about severe bruising on my back. Painkillers were administered and clips were applied to a wound on my head. I lay in bed, looking at Maddie's brave smile through her tears. Shauna stood by, eyes wet, as she said, "Thank you." "I'd do anything for you two," I whispered, leaning back painfully. Shauna kissed my forehead. "I love you too, Tim," she said, making me smile despite the pain. Suddenly I coughed, noticing a faint metallic taste, and Shauna's concerned voice called out as I felt a sharp pain in my side before everything faded to black. I woke 3 days later in a private hospital room with Rick beside me. "Hey buddy, how are you feeling?" he asked. "Terrible," I croaked. "Is Maddie okay?" Rick smiled. "She's fine, with a cast and all. She'll be back at school next week, telling everyone about her hero dad." I tried to laugh, but winced. Rick handed me a device. "Press for morphine if the pain's too much." "What else?" I asked. Rick's face turned serious. "A rib punctured your lung. They did minor surgery, but you'll recover." A nurse checked my vitals and adjusted my meds before leaving. "Any news on Brad?" I asked. Rick pulled out his phone, showing a news clip from the night Maddie and I were brought in. The anchor announced a manhunt for Bradley Houghton, who attacked me, stole my car and phone, and was last seen heading toward Newcastle. He was considered dangerous, and the public was urged to call Crime Stoppers if they saw him. "They caught him yesterday in Wollongong," Rick said. "He ran a red light in your car and got arrested. The car's totaled, but at least he's caught." I nodded. "Glad he's caught. Maddie's safe. That's what matters." Maddie soon ran into the room with Shauna and Greg behind her. "Daddy!" she cried, climbing onto my bed with concern. "I'm feeling better, Princess," I said, smiling. "You were so brave." "My doctor said I was brave, but I told him you were the brave one," she said, glancing at our matching casts. "Thanks, sweetheart," I said, holding back tears. "We'll have another beach day when we're better." Rick took the kids for a walk, leaving Shauna with me. "You scared us," she said, holding my hand. "I'm sorry," I replied. "Just glad you're okay." Nadine and colleagues later visited with cards and chocolates, which Greg had already sampled. After over a week in the hospital, police took my full statement and soon arrested Bridget as an accessory. During questioning, Brad revealed she encouraged him to damage me out of revenge. Brad was sentenced to 15 years for attack, theft, and property damage, with a chance of parole after 12. Bridget received a 5-year sentence with probation, facing the full term if she broke any rules. The judge granted me an immediate divorce, saying no one deserved to be tied to someone like her. Surprisingly, I offered Bridget $10,000 to start fresh with the condition she left Byron Bay. During recovery, Nadine worked with me at home, often joined by Shauna. Nadine, my executive assistant, was married and in her 60s, so romance wasn't in the picture. One day, seeing Maddie with her signed cast, I was inspired to run a charity campaign in our games. For every $10 Pack bought, we'd donate $1 to charity. The finance team initially resisted, as it cut 30% of profit, but revenue soared, and we raised nearly $500,000 for charities in Australia, Poland, and South America. This campaign became an annual event. By summer, Maddie and I had healed, and we returned to the beach, joined by Shauna, Greg, and sometimes Rick. It was a great summer, but I felt lonely. Shauna suggested I start dating again. "I just don't feel it," I admitted. My few dates had gone poorly. Either no chemistry or they were after money, like Bridget. "I wish I could find someone like you, Shauna," I said. She smiled knowingly, but stayed quiet. At 31, I had time to figure it out. A year later, Bridget made occasional contact, mostly seeking money or forgiveness. Each time I refused and ended the conversation. Life was about to change again. I had turned 32, and Shanna, Nadine, and my team planned a birthday party at my house. I stayed in that house post-divorce, having invested so much into it and appreciating its beauty. Over 100 guests attended my birthday party, including coworkers, local business people, and even Carly Evans. Family members, like my parents and Shauna's, were there, along with some of Rick's relatives. The atmosphere was lively with food, drinks, and music, and I was enjoying the buzz as people kept handing me fresh drinks. I had just seen Maddie playing when I bumped into a woman and muttered an apology. "That's all you have to say? Just sorry?" she snapped. I turned to face her, a striking tall woman with deep blue eyes, long red hair, and a floral jumpsuit. She held an unlit cigarette. "Where can I smoke?" she asked, annoyed. "There's no smoking here, and you'll need to go outside," I replied. "Is the owner really that strict?" she asked mockingly. "Yes," I said. She pointed to a quiet spot by the pool, but I shook my head. "Not here, especially with kids around." At the mention of kids, she tucked the cigarette away. Just then, Maddie walked up with her friends and Greg. "Daddy said no smoking, so don't smoke," Maddie declared. "Is this man your dad?" the woman asked. "Uh-huh," Maddie said, hands on her hips, mirrored by the other kids. The woman stepped back, surprised. Before Maddie could escalate, Greg, thinking I was about to act, pushed the woman. Standing at the pool's edge in heels, she lost her balance. I reached out to catch her, but we both fell in with a splash. I surfaced laughing while she sputtered and glared at me. "How dare you laugh?" she scolded. "It's funny," I said, holding back a grin. "We fell in. Classic slapstick." "Karen," I joked, and she looked confused. "Who's Karen?" she demanded, as the cigarette floated between us. "Sorry, I don't know your name. But with your attitude and wanting a smoking spot, I figured Karen fit," I said with a grin. Her face turned red with anger. "My name is Lily," she corrected, with a hint of pain in her eyes. "Tim," Rick called, walking over with Shauna and towels. "Knew you'd get into trouble," he muttered, glancing between Lily and me. I helped Lily out of the pool, thinking this night had taken an unexpected turn. As the pool incident settled, guests resumed their conversations, laughing as we climbed out. Shayna smirked at me, dripping wet. "You got in sooner than expected. Happy birthday, water boy," she teased. Grabbing a towel, I did my best Blue Steel impression and joked, Merman, strutting away like a model. Shayna burst into laughter. Rick handed a towel to Lily, who muttered, "Who is Tim anyway? The most arrogant man and no smoking allowed." "That's our host, the birthday boy," Rick said, giving her bag back. Lily's eyes widened as she saw me reenacting the fall with guests and caught my glance. "Not again," Lily groaned as Rick chuckled, and I went inside to change. The evening continued smoothly, with Greg getting a gentle reprimand for pushing and Maddie receiving a talk about understanding situations before reacting. Later, I saw Maddie apologize to Lily, who was drying off with clothes Shauna had lent her. As the evening wound down, I noticed Lily with Rick and Shauna. Most guests had left or were watching a movie with the kids. I poured a drink and joined them. "So, Karen," I teased, "do you work parties like this or just special ones?" She smiled. "Only for arrogant men whose kids push me into pools." I laughed. "They're Rick and Shauna's kids." Lily looked confused. "But Maddie's yours, right? And Greg is Shauna and Rick's?" "Yes, Tim and I were married, and Maddie is our daughter," Shanna confirmed. Lily's expression shifted to sadness. "How do you handle it?" she asked, a hint of pain in her voice. Rick spoke up. "Lily, Tim and Shanna are best friends. I learned not to be jealous. They share Maddie, and I trust them completely." He smiled at Shanna, who giggled. "It's unusual," Shanna added. "But we were friends before marriage, and Tim's always supported Maddie and me. We realized we weren't meant to be married, but I trust him as I would a brother." Lily's expression softened. "That case Rick was involved with a couple of years ago, was that you?" "Yes," I said, taking a sip. "Maddie's protective because of what happened. She saw me get hurt, and Greg was just copying her bravery when he pushed you. I'm sorry for that." Lily nodded, understanding. "If you need to smoke, feel free," I offered. "But I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," she sighed. "It's a bad habit I picked up again recently." A tear formed as she glanced at Rick and then walked to a quiet corner. Rick shook his head slightly. "That's a story for another time," he said. When Lily returned, her eyes were red from crying. We shifted the conversation to Star Wars. Rick and Shanna weren't big fans, but had watched some episodes with me, like The Mandalorian. I joked about future plot lines when Lily surprised us by joining in, smiling for the first time and showing her hidden warmth. "Are you a Star Wars fan?" I asked. "More of a general sci-fi fan," she admitted. As midnight approached, most guests left, leaving just us and the kids asleep in lounge chairs. I settled Shauna, Rick, and Greg in their room, while Maddie went to hers, and Lily stayed in the guest room. As I fell asleep, I recalled Lily's striking figure in the pool, but noted her smoking habit. The next few days were spent at my house with Shayna, Rick, and Lily. We went to the beach, swam, and had fun. Despite her smoking habit, Lily turned out to be kind. One evening, while watching Shayna, Rick, and the kids in the pool, I asked Lily, "What's your story?" She glared. "None of your business," she snapped. I raised my hands, apologizing. "I was curious since you never actually smoke." Lily hesitated but finally spoke. "I lost the baby," she said quietly. I nodded, listening as she recounted how she'd gotten pregnant 6 months into her relationship. Her boyfriend Aaron was initially reluctant, and as she began showing, he came home drunk more often. One night, an argument escalated, and he pushed her when he heard approaching sirens, thinking she had called the police. She lost the baby 2 days later and needed surgery. "I'm so sorry, Lily," I said, my voice heavy with sympathy. "Thank you," she whispered, wiping her eyes and handing me a tissue, which I accepted as my own eyes grew wet. She explained that she fell into depression and was put on medications. "Sometimes I can be a bit cocky," she added with a small laugh. I joined in, lightening the moment. "You started smoking to cope?" I asked lightly. Lily nodded. "My friends and I smoked in college. It's a bad habit, but it helps." "Can I give you a hug?" I asked gently. She looked at me, surprised. "The police and surgeon couldn't offer that," I said softly. Lily stood and walked over, arms open like Maddie when she wanted comfort. I hugged her, and she stiffened at first, but then clung to me, breaking down in sobs. I glanced at Shanna and Rick by the pool. Rick frowned, but Shanna led him and the kids away to give us space. I guided Lily to a quieter spot, and she rested her head on my chest, still crying, as I held her like I would Maddie when she was upset. After about 10 minutes, Shayna and Rick brought the kids inside, passing us quietly. Shanna returned with tissues and water, setting them down before leaving. Lily looked at the setup, her eyes puffy and makeup smudged. I wiped her tears, poured water, and handed it to her. "Are you okay?" I asked. Lily shook her head, then nodded. "Yeah, thanks. I needed that." I smiled. "It's okay. When I divorced Bridget, Shauna comforted me too. I probably looked worse than you." Lily laughed, glancing at the tissue. "Shauna is really special to you, huh?" she asked. "She's my best friend. We've been through everything together, even during our divorce," I said. "What about Bridget?" Lily asked. I sighed. Marrying Bridget was a mistake. She cheated for a long time, and while I thought I loved her, she just saw me as a meal ticket. "I'm sorry, Tim," Lily said. "Despite my rough start with you, you're a good person. Bridget was foolish. Any girl would be lucky to have you." "Any girl?" I raised an eyebrow. Lily nodded. "Yeah, if only I could be that girl." Before she could finish, I leaned in and kissed her. Her eyes widened, then closed, and she kissed me back, this time not with comfort, but genuine attraction. When we broke apart, she smiled. "That was unexpected," she said, then quickly added, "but not unwelcome." "Exactly," I said. We talked as the sun set, sharing stories of past pain. Lily mentioned her ex was now in jail for attack and DUI. The night he attacked her, he was driving well over the legal limit. As night fell, Shanna and the kids returned with Rick carrying a hot pizza. The mood was tense for a moment until Lily told Shanna and Rick we had discussed old wounds, without details. I knew Shanna would ask me for more later. After dinner, we all went home. Maddie stayed with me while Shanna and Rick took Greg and Lily to their place. The hug with Lily was awkward, but there was an undeniable affection that didn't go unnoticed by Shanna or Rick. As Maddie and I were getting ready for bed, she asked me a serious question. "You like her, don't you?" Maddie said, brushing her hair. "I think I do, but we've only known her for a couple of days. Let's give her time, okay? We don't want another Bridget," I replied. Maddie snorted. "I don't think Lily's like that," she said, catching herself. "Sorry, I meant that undeserving woman." I laughed. "It's okay. Bridget was a bit of a witch." We shared a smile. "But just watch your words, and Lily... well, we'll see." "What do you think?" Maddie chewed her lip. "She's not like Bridget. Mom and I noticed how she looks at you. She's been through stuff, too." "Yeah, she has," I agreed, then changed the subject as we settled into the bedtime routine. Later, I was in my office when Shanna called. "I don't know what you said, but Lily can't stop talking about you," she said, teasing but concerned. I chuckled. "Hi to you too," I replied, multitasking by reviewing the development schedule. "I'm serious, Tim. She told Rick all the way home that you're great. Apparently her ex was abusive. Shanna continued. She told me, I confirmed quietly. Shauna paused. She's been through a lot, hasn't she? Yeah, a lot, I replied. But she told me in confidence. I can't share more, even with you. After a pause, Shauna said, So, you like her? I hesitated. Yeah, I do. She's smart, funny, loves sci-fi, and doesn't mind that I'm a geek. Shanna laughed. And gorgeous too, right? I hadn't noticed, I replied, trying to stay serious. We both laughed. Shanna shifted back to serious. She likes you more than just a flirtation. She's asked me about you and Maddie, and she's worried about us. I smiled. She doesn't need to be. After talking with her and Maddie, I'm starting to think there's life after Bridget. Shanna agreed. There will be. Do you mind if I speak for you? I know what to say. Sure, go ahead, I said. I'm not sure it's going anywhere, but let's see. 3 days passed without word from Lily or Shanna. Maddie seemed quiet, and during dinner I caught her glancing at me like something was up. I buried myself in work. Then, Wednesday night, I came home to find Maddie, Shanna, and Lily in my living room. Shanna and Lily were drinking wine, and the smell of carbonara wafted from the kitchen. After dinner, I excused myself to my office to plan my evening work. Once Maddie was in bed, I kept a low profile, unsure how things would play out with Lily. Lily, she said as she entered, stopping to look around at my computer setup. Her gaze lingered on the posters and awards lining the walls, reminders of my success with other gaming. I know this game, she said, pointing to one. I spent a lot of money on the bonus packs. She continued to recognize others and showed me a game on her phone that had helped her during a tough time in the hospital. Do you work for the people who make these games? She asked, intrigued. Open puzzle build. And look at the bottom right, I said. When she saw the name Other Gaming, her eyes widened. That's me, I confirmed. I started the company when I was 19, and all of these games are mine. Lily was stunned. You own the company? The games? She asked, disbelief in her voice. I chuckled. Yeah, I guess that makes me more than just another guy. Lily's face went pale. I just came to tell you dinner's ready, she muttered. Dinner was excellent, with Lily preparing a delicious carbonara, garlic bread, and vanilla ice cream. The mood was warm, but Lily was quiet despite the compliments from us all. Afterward, Shauna took Maddie to bed and subtly signaled for me to talk to Lily. I poured us each a glass of dessert wine, then sat with Lily. You okay, Lily? I asked. The dinner was amazing, but you didn't seem to enjoy it. She sighed and slouched on the couch. Tim, have you ever felt like you can rise above everything, but then you realize it's impossible? The gap is just too wide? I thought for a moment. I felt that way with Bridget. I loved her, but when I found out the truth, it broke me. Something still feels off, but I know I need to fix it. Lily nodded. You're my ravine? She said softly. I was confused. I don't understand. How can I be your chasm? She smiled, then blushed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I think we both know there's something between us. That kiss... She paused, but the smile faded as she grew more serious. But after spending time with everyone, I realized I can't bridge the gap between us. I can't be the one for you. Why? I asked, puzzled. Lily looked at me, her eyes filled with emotion. I'm just an administrator from nowhere. I make under $60,000 a year. I can't compare to your world. I don't want to be a gold digger. Sometimes I feel like I'm nothing. She teared up, and I reached out, unsure of how to comfort her. Lily poured her heart out, worried I'd see her as a gold digger like Bridget. She'd lost a child and was angry, but for some reason she opened up to me. I knew what I had to do. Lily, come with me. I took her hand and led her outside. As we walked by the pool, I suddenly picked her up and jumped in, fully clothed. As we surfaced, I started laughing and Lily hissed, just like the week before. Lily, I don't care about your past. You're not nothing to me. You're beautiful, talented, and you cared enough tonight to cook an amazing dinner. Before you came into my office, I assumed Shauna and Maddie saw you liked me, and they encouraged you, right? She nodded. If they thought you were a gold digger, you wouldn't have even been here tonight, I continued. They don't think that about you. If you'll let me, I'd love to date you and see where it goes. Lily kissed me again. Okay, Mr. Other, but only if you promise not to throw me into pools again. I laughed. Sorry, no deal. Before we could say more, Shanna entered, dropping towels on the table. If you need them, I'll leave towels here. Maddie's in bed and won't bother you. Shanna smiled and sat down. Watch out for Tim, Lily. He's good. Better than Rick, she teased. I blushed. "Good night, we're going out tomorrow," Shayna said as she left. Lily turned to me, confused. What did she mean by that? "Shauna is protective of those she cares about," I explained. "She never really liked Bridget, but she tolerated her for me. And she just gave you her blessing to pursue me. Trust me, no one else has gotten that." I pulled Lily out of the pool and we wrapped ourselves in towels. We tossed our wet clothes in the laundry and went to my room. As we passed Maddie's room, she called out, "Good night, Daddy. Good night, Lily." The next month was magical. Lily moved in, and we spent lots of time dating and enjoying each other. She applied for a job with the local council and fit in just fine. Meanwhile, I kept a low profile and avoided the glamour of my social circle. When I had to travel to Sydney for a night, Lily panicked. She was worried if I wasn't back by midnight, she'd be alone again. So I arranged to take her with me. She charmed one of the board members and fit right in. A few months later, after a playful pool push before dinner, we exchanged "I love yous." A year after that, I proposed. Maddie and Shauna were thrilled. Our backyard wedding was perfect, with Rick as my best man and Shauna as my maid of honor. After saying "I do," they pushed us into the pool, and it made for the best photos. For our honeymoon, we toured Europe for a month, discovering how well we suited each other. We fought sometimes, but always worked things out. Lily was fiercely protective and a bit jealous, but it never got toxic. The only women she tolerated were Shauna, Maddie, and Nadine. Anyone else faced her fiery side. If I had worried after 2 failed marriages that loyalty would be an issue, 2 events during our first anniversary put those fears to rest. The first happened on a rare night when Shauna and Lily went to a local club with a group of women. Most were married, though a few were single. While the single women accepted dance invitations, neither Shauna nor Lily danced with any men. 2 men approached and wouldn't take no for an answer, even trying to escort Lily out. She handled it herself, elbowing one in the stomach and striking him with her purse when he refused to back off. She shouted, "I'm married and my body belongs to my husband," until security intervened. The case went to court where CCTV footage confirmed her story and the charges were dropped. The judge gave the men probation, emphasizing that no means no. The second incident occurred a month later. We were camping on Fraser Island, enjoying the sun and surf. A week later, Lily ran into Bridget by chance at a cafe. Bridget, who hadn't seen me since our divorce, had somehow found out about Lily. My wife told me about the encounter while we relaxed by the pool. Rick and Shauna were on the other side, and Maddie and Greg were playing nearby. "I just had an appointment with someone named B. Brown," Lily started. When she sat down, she stared at me for a long moment before speaking. Bridget hadn't changed. She was still confrontational, and her smirk spoke volumes. "Now I see why he likes you," she said. Lily, assuming it would be a polite conversation, replied, "Thank you, Miss Brown. I like to think my husband Tim finds me attractive." Bridget's smile twisted into something malicious. "Oh, I didn't mean Tim," she snapped. "I meant Aaron." Lily gasped, stunned. "Why did you mention Aaron? How do you know him?" Bridget's eyes sparkled. "Aaron and I know a lot about you. After he got out of prison, I tracked him down." Her voice dropped with venom. "I was Mrs. Other before you, and I want him back." The realization hit, and Lily's shock turned to anger. "Bridget," she said evenly. Bridget nodded. "I'm a witch, but Tim is mine. I made mistakes, but I'll fix them. He loved my body, my curves. You're just damaged goods. A broken woman who lost a baby." Lily's fists clenched. Instead of lashing out physically, she composed herself and stood up. But Bridget wasn't done. She yanked Lily's hair, screaming, "You'll leave Tim. I'll take him back and everything will be mine again." Lily fought back, landing a punch that knocked Bridget down and tripped her to the ground. "Someone call the police," Lily said to the cafe patrons who had already done so. When the police arrived, they took statements and arrested Bridget. Lily, acting in self-defense, was cleared after several witnesses corroborated her story. Later, Lily admitted she regretted telling Bridget about the pregnancy before telling me. I just laughed and reassured her that Bridget's reaction was insignificant compared to her safety and our unborn child. Bridget was later served a restraining order against all of us, and we never saw her again. Years later, we learned she had married a criminal and faced prison herself. The real surprise came when we found out Lily wasn't carrying twins, but triplets. It was 3 a.m. on a Wednesday when Lily went into labor. Connor, Adam, and their sister Jessie were born via C-section. The doctors were cautious to avoid complications. I was with Lily the entire time, holding her hand through the procedure. She was incredibly brave, and my love for her deepened. I took a 3-month leave from other gaming with the help of a nanny Maddie's big sister instincts, and Shauna and Rick's support. Changing diapers for 3 babies brought chaos. The house often smelled, but life went on, and we found our rhythm. We had our disagreements, especially when tired. Once I left to cool off at Rick and Shauna's, but we worked things out. Now, the triplets are 3, and Saturday afternoons by the pool have become our tradition. 15 minutes ago, I threw Lily into the pool after she joked that I should act more like Riker from Star Trek. She grabbed me and pulled me in with her. The kids joined us, and soon everyone was splashing around. Later, Lily and I climbed out, drying off while Shauna and Rick joined us. Shauna was still my best friend, and had been a pillar throughout everything. Years later, we all sat down, sharing stories and memories. One afternoon, as we played cards, Shauna leaned over with a sly smile. "She's cheating, you know," she whispered. For a split second, my heart raced. The last time she'd said that, my life nearly fell apart. But this time, I smiled. "I know," I whispered back, catching Lily's playful smirk as she eyed the mirror showing my cards. "He knows what's good for him, Shauna," Lily called out, laying down her cards. "If I win now, he wins later," she added, with a teasing look at me. And yes, I did win later twice.